Welcome to 30 Minutes Away. How has your day been reading?
You took the long way home, but
It's been raining here in southern skies, which is ironic for the story I have for you today. The writing room has gotten poetic about suns, star songs, gotten all sci-fi. It's beautiful, inhabitable. The tuning of suns sound like some sort of futuristic discipline. But in this story, it's not. It's the old way. So let me get it ready. The story is The Second Voice. I'll see you on the other side.
The sun spoke in frequencies Isra had learned to hear long before she learned to trust them. Every morning, though there were no mornings here, only the slow rotation of the antiphon's monitoring cycle, she settled into the helm alcove and placed her palms on the resonance plates and listened. Halcyon pulsed at its appointed pitch, a deep, warm amber, a tone somewhere between a sustained cello and the thrum of an ancient bell. No instrument could translate the frequency exactly. That was the nature of star music. You felt it through the plates as much as heard it, and you learned to read what deviation felt like before you learned to correct it. Isra Calloway had been reading Halcyon for 11 years. She was its keeper. Its one note, steady as a heartbeat, was her life's work, and her whole self-definition. The star ran about 4% hotter than its natural state. The engine the old starwrights had seeded into it generations ago needed that heat to hold pitch. And without her daily tuning, it would drift, blue shift, almost imperceptible at first, the color bleeding toward a harder light. Eventually, over years, silence. She kept it from going flat. That was what she did. The resonance plates were warm under her palms. She adjusted a drift of 3 nanometers and felt the star settle, felt it the way a pianist feels, a string returning to proper tension, not through sound exactly, but through the cessation of a mild wrongness. Halcyon sang on. Outside the antiphon's curved windows, the star was a butter yellow disk, and the dark pressed close on all sides. She was alone here, had been for years, would be for years more. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were perhaps 6 other active starwrights. She had not been in contact with more than 2 of them in recent memory. The Concorde considered the old star engines a legacy problem, costly to maintain, frivolous in purpose, soon to be retired to more practical uses. They let the starwrights tend their posts from habit more than conviction, the way old caretakers are kept on in a house that's already been sold. Oriel Damaris had told her the art was not dying, had told her this with the absolute certainty of a teacher who has not yet lost faith. Then Oriel had traveled to the outer reaches of the system to check a dimming secondary. Isra was 17, mid-lesson, learning the early signs of composition, and had not come back. 11 years later, Isra knew only the one thing she had been taught before the lesson ended, how to hold a note. She was, she supposed, very good at it. The dimming began on the 93rd day of the monitoring cycle. She almost missed it. Lethe was far, not impossibly, but far enough that its light reached her as a faint point in the deep field array, a secondary data point in the stellar survey she ran each fortnight. But she ran it carefully because Oriel had run it carefully, and this morning the faint point had a pattern. Isra sat up straighter, pulled Lethe into center display. The star was dimming in intervals, 4 seconds of reduced luminosity, 2 seconds of full, 7 seconds dimming, 1 second full, 4 again. Not the random flutter of instability, not the slow, monotonic fade of depletion, something else entirely. She played it back, listening with a part of her mind that did not usually engage for distant survey stars. And then her blood went cold. She knew that phrasing. The intervals, Their ratios, the way the silence was as constructed as the sound, the particular asymmetry of 4 then 7 versus 7 then 4, she had heard it before. In a teaching alcove, 11 years ago, a voice sang, "Listen for how the silence is placed. That's where the intention lives." Lethe was not decaying. Lethe was calling. She spent 2 days not going. This was not cowardice. This was practicality, she told herself. She was Halcyon's keeper. To leave was to leave the star untended. And while a healthy sun could sustain for weeks without intervention, she had never tested it. The drift was always there, always waiting to be corrected, always a few percentage points from the edge of audible flat. She told herself she couldn't read the whole composition, even if she went. She had never been trained to compose. She could hear that the intervals were intentional, but to answer them, to supply the missing line, was beyond her. She was a maintainer. She did not know the first movement of a living voice. Then the Concord bulletin arrived. Routine priority, standard distribution. Lethe Class G. Main sequence. Star registry 4471L. Engine components to be reclaimed for district grid retrofit. Procedure scheduled 60 standard days. Engine custodians, if any, please report for decommission protocols. Directorate of Energy and Stellar Resources. She read it 3 times. If any. There were none of record. No one officially minding Lethe. And in 60 days, the engine would be pulled, and whatever Oriel had written into that star would end, unfinished, in the dark. She sat for a long time looking at the bulletin. Then she closed it and went to the archive. The lesson cylinder was in the 3rd cabinet, unlabeled, tucked behind a collection of tuning calibration records. She almost missed it again, but she was looking for Oriel, looking desperately now, and her hands knew the shape of the cylinders from years of handling them, and this one felt different. Used, worn at one end, she slotted it into the reader. Oriel's voice filled the antiphon. "You will want to argue that your job is maintenance." The voice was older than she remembered, or she was hearing it differently now from 11 years of silence. "I did too. I was wrong. A starwright who can only maintain has learned to hold a breath but not to breathe. Maintenance is the body of the craft. Composition is the life in it. A sun alone is only a note. 2 suns are a song. And a song is the only thing that persists after its players are gone. Whatever you have in front of you that frightens you, the score you think you can't read, the voice you think you don't have, that is your true lesson. Maintenance ends. Composition begins there." Isra sat still for a long time after the cylinder ran out. Then she set Halcyon to a long sustain. The deepest, slowest drone the engine could hold. Weeks of stability if the drift stayed small, and she went and found the Caroline. The skiff was small and old, and had not been flown in 2 years. She spent a day on its systems, and then she flew it into the dark, Halcyon at her back, Lethe so far ahead it barely registered on the proximity array. The crossing took 18 days. She used the time to listen. She pulled every hour of Lethe's dimming signal and played it back again, and began, slowly, imperfectly, to hear the shape of the composition. It was unlike anything she had studied. Oriel's characteristic phrasing was there, the asymmetric intervals, the long silences that were not empty but waiting, but it was only half a song, a right hand with no left, a question written in light across the dark, with the answer space left completely open. The more she listened, the more afraid she became, because the answer space was enormous. There were 100 ways to answer, and only the right one would complete the duet, and only Oriel would have known which one it was, and Oriel was gone. She was still afraid when Lethe's derelict observatory slid into her forward display. The station was called Pericalion in the Concord register, empty of record. But as she matched orbits, she saw lights in 2 of the windows and a small, careful response blink from the docking guide. The man who met her in the station's lock was old, not fragile, old the way structural elements go, old, gray, and dense, and carrying more load than you'd expect. He had the look of someone who had stopped being surprised by the galaxy, but had not stopped watching it carefully. His name was Sabran. "Oriel's student," he said, not a question. "You knew to expect me?" "I knew someone would come eventually. Oriel always said so." He paused. "I have been waiting a long time." He was Oriel's first apprentice, trained decades before Isra, trained to a different half of the craft. He could hear a star and read its health, could maintain a signal and broadcast it across the deep field arrays. He had come to Lethe when Oriel sent a message he didn't understand, and arrived to find the star already singing, and Oriel already gone, spent in the keeping of it. "The engine was failing when I arrived," Sabran told her over a meal of reconstituted stores. Oriel poured everything into steadying it, into composing the first voice and seeding it into the star. "Died of exhaustion, I think, though the Concorde logged it as accident. I have been maintaining the song as it was left, keeping it from going flat." Outside the window, Lethe pulsed in its measured intervals, 4-2-7-1-4. "I cannot compose," Sabran said quietly. "I was never taught." And the answering voice, "Oriel built the score so that the second line cannot be recorded. It must be living, a real player, real time, improvising from the listening. No playback holds it. No recording can substitute." He looked at her steadily. "It must be you." Isra looked at the old man's hands, patient and worn, and understood what 4 decades of holding a single note looked like. She understood it completely. She could see herself in another 4 decades, the same gravity, the same quiet waiting, something unsaid accumulating behind the eyes. "When does the fleet arrive?" she asked. 41 days. "Then I should start." The helm of Lethe's engine was deeper than Halcyon's, older, rougher, built for hands that had studied a different tradition. Isra settled into the alcove and placed her palms on the resonance plates and listened. Lethe pulsed. The star was dimmer than Halcyon, cooler, tending toward orange at its edges. An aging instrument, she thought, but not broken, not beyond answering. Its first voice moved through the plates like a question she had been hearing for weeks now. The long intervals, the placed silences, the particular shape of Oriel's attention still written into the light. She breathed and tried to do what she knew how to do. She mapped the first voice's intervals into her own signal chain and began adjusting to match, to echo, to hold the structure exactly as Oriel had left it, to become a second note of identical pitch. The star lurched. Something went wrong in the engine's lower registers. A harmonic conflict, 2 signals fighting each other. And Lethe's light stuttered. In a way that wasn't composed, but was simply wrong. Isra overcorrected, and the star dimmed hard before she backed off the plates, shaking. "You're playing at the same note," Sabran said from behind her. "I know." She was breathing too fast. "I know. I don't know how else to play it." "Listen to it," he said. "Not to the score, to the star." She put her palms back on the plates and tried to do only that. Tried to hear Lethe the way she heard Halcyon, not as a problem to be solved or a score to be matched, but as an instrument with its own tendencies, its own warmth and drift and particular way of leaning into the silence. And she heard it. Lethe was not asking to be echoed. It was asking to be answered. The first voice rose and paused, rose and paused, and the silence it left was shaped. She could feel it now. The silence was a question, a specific question asked to a specific kind of listener. Not, "Can you repeat what I said?" but "What do you say?" Her hands moved before she decided to move them. A longer held tone where Oriel's voice had been short. A brighter pulse where the score had dimmed. A different interval. Not wrong, not random, but hers. Her response to what the star was doing, rather than an imitation of what it had done. Lethe brightened, held, then answered her back, or answered the combination, the duet the 2 voices made together. And for the first time in her life, Isra understood what Oriel had meant by a song. She had been hearing one note so long, she had forgotten that music was an exchange. They played for 3 hours, the living second voice and the recorded first. And when Isra finally lifted her hands, the station was very quiet. She was crying, which surprised her. She had not cried in years. Outside the window, Lethe burned warm and even, brighter than it had been when she arrived, the orange shading back toward gold, a star reclaimed from the edge of its own ending, and somewhere, across the dark, impossibly far, she thought she could almost feel it through the deep harmonic register of the engine, Halcyon still holding its long sustaining note, her star, her first love, waiting, 2 suns, a song. The harvest fleet arrived on the 38th day. 3 Concord utility ships, a reclamation barge, and a dispatch vessel with an officer's pennant. Isra broadcast the duet the moment the fleet's ID signal resolved. She opened every channel the antiphon could access, routed through Lethe's own transmission engine, and played the full 3 hours of the living composition out into the dark. Every listening station in range would receive it. Every Concord system on the standard survey frequency would log it. She flagged it under the old charter designation, active living instrument, protected status, starwright registered, and attached every provision from Oriel's teaching records she could find. Then she waited. The fleet sat dark for 6 hours. Then the dispatch vessel's comms came live, a young woman's voice, careful and professionally formal. Perikelian Station, this is Commander Adjutant Sarah Holm, Concord Reclamation Fleet 7. We have received and logged your broadcast. We are reviewing the protected status designation. A pause. I have to tell you, I have been listening for 6 hours. I didn't know what this was before. I didn't know this existed. It almost didn't, Isra said. What would we be looking for? If the classification holds, what does a living instrument need to continue operation? Isra looked at Sebron, who was watching her from across the helm room. He looked tired and very light, as if something heavy had been set down. A starwright, she said, someone to hold the second voice. A long silence. Then, I am a signals officer. I have been trained in frequency analysis and resonance mapping. Another pause. Quieter. Could someone learn? From the beginning? The beginning is simpler than you think, Isra said. You learn to listen first. She spent 2 days teaching Sarah Holm the opening exercises, how to settle into the plates, how to hear the difference between a maintained note and a living one, how to only begin to feel the shape of what a star was asking. The young officer was careful and quick, and her hands found the plates with an instinct that made Isra catch her breath with recognition. Sabrin watched from his chair near the window. On the evening of the 2nd day, he called Isra over. I have been here a long time, he said. I know. The song is finished now. Oriel's work is done. He was quiet for a moment. I think I can go. She sat with him for a while. There was nothing difficult in it. He was not frightened, and neither, she found, was she. He had done what he came to do. The vigil was over. The art had hands. She flew home through the dark, and the dark felt different. The Carillon's drives were the same, the long transit the same, the stars in the deep field array the same points of ancient light. But she was not the same person who had flown out. She could feel it in the way she held the controls. Lighter, more responsive, less afraid of the empty space between waypoints. She tuned into Halcyon's signal as soon as the proximity array could reach it. The long, sustaining note was there, steady as always, amber and warm and patient in the dark. She answered it. From the Carillon's small resonance panel, she sent back a phrase, not a composition, just a greeting, a counter note, a few brief spoken words in the language Oriel had given her. Halcyon pulsed on, but she heard something in the way it held now. Not just a note, but the beginning of a question. Not I am here, but what do you say? She had an answer. She would have answers from now on. Behind her, Growing small in the rear display, Lethe still burned at its new warm pitch. Sarah Holmes' first transmission as its keeper, rough, a little uncertain, but unmistakably alive, would follow Isra home across the dark for months. And far beyond both stars, in a direction the survey array barely reached, a third point of light had begun to pulse, slowly, deliberately, an interval she did not recognize in a phrasing she had never heard before. Someone had received the broadcast, someone was calling. She did not know their name, or their star, or what the composition was asking. She only knew that somewhere in the dark a new song was beginning, and that it was waiting for a second voice, as it always had been, as it always would be. She set her hands to the resonance panel and began to listen.
Okay, there's something beautiful about the tension between a dying art and actually living in it. Yisa spent 11 years choosing safety until that choice completely ran out. She was tuning this star, and she knew how to do that. 11 years of doing it well. And then suddenly, the stakes were raised. What's merciless about it, the call, the ability to communicate with the stars and improv, jazz improv with the stars, was always there. It was always a possibility, but she sat on it for a long time. She could have answered that call at any point, but it took a pain point to change her mind. Just think about that. So let's tour the world a little bit. The Concorde, a bureaucracy winding down this legacy problem of star engines, tolerating these starwrights, kind of out of habit, just because, well, why not? And they're going to go on being a bureaucracy in this story. That doesn't change. Then we've got the stars, the Halcyon and Lethe, living instruments seated with engines that were fabricated generations ago, requiring daily tuning and compositional answering to stay alive. These starwrights were kind of like losing their craft. They were supposed to jazz improv with these stars, but they just were tuning them. The stars were going a little bit flat. They would bring them back, and not really they were not like improving. They weren't just playing with the stars. They were just doing their work. The starwrights, the keepers of this dying art, were devolving themselves. They were failing because they were no longer composing with the stars. They were just maintaining the stars. And Yisra discovers her ability to compose instead of just maintain. And so, another question, are you maintaining? Or are you composing? The decommission protocol, 60 days until Lethe's engine got gutted for other practical purposes. And if you look at it, Sebron's role in all this was, kind of weak. He had devolved too. Think about Oriel. He had learned under Oriel, and this Oriel was this amazing starwright that created all of this amazing these teachings basically on how to be a starwright, and he had devolved to maintenance. and the weight of it all had hollowed him out. The writing room buries this very human story of paralysis and deadline panic and maintenance versus composition under cosmic grandeur and just suns singing and all of this crazy stuff that, frankly, I love. I get poetic about it. It's kind of interesting to have a star, tuner, a starwright. But really, when it comes down to it, this story is a story about getting up and living the life you were supposed to live. Oriel's lesson cylinder kind of said it this way: a starwright who can only maintain has learned to hold a breath, but not to breathe. The jump from maintenance to composition is framed not as a mastery, but as exchange, learning to listen to what the star is asking rather than repeating what it said. Instead of just repeating what the world is giving you, are you able to compose? Are you able to improv, jazz improv on your day? It's just a thought. So here's some lines that I wrote down that I thought were great. And how about this one? This was not cowardice. This was practicality, she told herself. Ouch. How often have I said that? This is not cowardice. This is practicality. I'm not going to do the hard thing. I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to try something new because it's practical not to do that. How about this? The silence was a question, a specific question asked to a specific kind of listener. The world is out there and it's asking a question, and it wants to know if you're that specific kind of listener. Maintenance ends. Composition begins here. This is a line in the sand. Maintenance ends at some point in time. At some point in time, you have to stop maintaining and you have to start composing. So the last thing I want to do is I want to ask kind of some difficult questions. Is the author kind or cruel to Yizra? And this was an interesting question that I asked myself. Okay, is Yizra ultimately a coward because she went 11 years before she decided to do something and waited until the last minute when something really painful was going to happen and she decided to go do something? And I thought about that back and forth, worked on that back and forth, and I realized that there were three characters that represented three different elements. There's Oriel, of course, and she is the one that composes, and she left and went far away, and we never hear from her again. And then on the other side, there's Sebron, who just basically devolved and just went into maintenance. And he had done that for years and years and years and years and years. What is it? 20 years, 40 years, something like that. And there's Sarah, who was a young commander who decided to compose right away. Not hold back, not maintain, just, hey, maybe I can do that. The real story is small and human, even though the size of it is ginormous as the size of suns. Do you choose stagnation? Do you wait until the last moment to do anything? Maybe you should. Maybe you shouldn't. What does it cost you to maintain something you don't fully understand? And when does that caretaking start to hollow you out? That's what I want to know. That's what I'm going to leave you with. Okay, for any correspondence, write to me with your genre suggestions and story ideas at podcasts@pipchi.com. That's PIPCHI.com. Until next time. Until next story.